The airport was busy. People rushed in all directions, some talking on phones, others pulling shiny new suitcases. In the middle of all this movement, Alicia stood quietly in the check-in line. She was in her early 30s with soft eyes, smooth brown skin, and neatly tied-back hair. She wore a plain blue dress and old sneakers. Her suitcase was even older. Its fabric was torn in places. The zipper looked like it would break any second, and the handle had tape wrapped around it. But Alicia didn't seem to care. She stood calm and patient, holding the bag with care like it had value no one else could see. When it was her turn, she rolled the suitcase to the counter. The airport security officer standing nearby was tall, white, and had a strong voice. He looked at Alicia, then looked at her suitcase. A smirk appeared on his face. "Did you find that in the trash?" he said loudly, his voice full of sarcasm. A few people in the line behind her giggled. One woman whispered something to her friend and laughed again. A young man looked down, trying not to smile. Alicia froze. She looked at the officer for a second, then lowered her eyes. She didn't say anything. Her face turned red with embarrassment. Her hands gently tightened around the handle of her bag. The officer didn't stop there. "You sure this thing will survive the flight?" he added, chuckling. A flight attendant nearby heard it all. Her smile faded. She looked at Alicia, then at the officer, and then looked away. She didn't say anything either. Alicia handed over her ID and ticket without a word. Her fingers shook slightly, but her face stayed calm. She had been through worse. Much worse. The officer continued his work like nothing had happened. Alicia, still silent, took out her phone and typed a message. It happened again. "I'm tired of this." Then she pressed send. No name, no emotion in her face, just that one message. As she walked away from the counter, people moved around her, busy with their lives. No one stopped. No one asked if she was okay. But inside Alicia's heart, a storm was growing. She found a seat near gate 27, sat down, and placed the bag beside her like an old friend. Her eyes stared out the window at the runway, but her mind was far away. Behind her calm face, memories played like a movie. Times she had been looked down on, judged by her clothes, her skin, her voice. It was never about the suitcase. It was about how they saw her. Yet she still didn't cry. Not even a single tear. Her phone buzzed. She looked down. A reply had come. "I'm on my way." No name, no details, just those 4 words. But those 4 words changed her expression. Her back straightened. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. A small fire lit inside them. The same officer who had mocked her earlier walked by again, laughing with another staff member. He didn't even notice her sitting there. But soon he would. The plane she was waiting for had just landed. People were beginning to walk toward the arrival gate. Alicia stood up slowly, brushed her dress smooth, and picked up her suitcase. The old wheels of the bag squeaked as she walked toward the exit. People might have laughed at her bag. They might have judged her for her simple dress or quiet voice. But none of them knew who she really was, and they had no idea who she had just messaged. Alicia stepped into the crowd, her worn-out suitcase trailing behind her. People bustled around, some rushing to catch their flights, others looking at their phones. The sound of rolling suitcases filled the air, and the hum of voices blended into the background. Yet for Alicia, the world around her seemed distant. The words the officer had said to her still echoed in her mind. She knew she had been in situations like this before, where people judged her for things beyond her control. But it didn't make it any easier. It never did. As she walked, a soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "You okay, miss?" She turned to see Mr. Howard, the old cleaner who worked at the airport. He was a man in his late 60s, with gray hair and a weathered face. His uniform was simple, but his eyes were sharp, watching everything around him. Alicia smiled faintly. "I'm fine, Mr. Howard. Just tired." Mr. Howard gave her a knowing look. He had been working at the airport for years, and in all that time, he had seen it all. He had seen the way some people treated others, especially people like Alicia. He had seen the mockery, the whispers, the subtle insults that passed under the radar of most. "You sure about that?" he asked, his voice low and concerned. Alicia nodded, though her eyes held something deeper. "I've been through worse." Mr. Howard didn't speak for a moment, but then he leaned in slightly. "You're strong, girl, but don't let them get to you. They're small-minded." Alicia didn't say anything. She just looked at the floor and nodded. She didn't want to speak about it. Not here, not now. But there was something else behind Mr. Howard's words that made her pause. He wasn't just being kind. He was warning her. The security officer from earlier passed by, his uniform crisp, his walk confident. He was talking to a group of other airport staff, laughing as he told a story. Alicia didn't look up. She focused on her phone, checking the time. Her flight would board in 30 minutes. But Mr. Howard's eyes followed the officer. He sighed and muttered under his breath, "You just wait, boy." Alicia turned to him, confused. "What do you mean?" He glanced at the officer one last time before looking back at her. His face grew serious. "That man has made fun of enough people to fill an airport terminal. One day, his jokes will catch up with him. But you've got more than just the ability to walk away from people like him." Alicia raised an eyebrow, unsure of where he was going with this. "What do you mean? You're not just a passenger. You're not just some random traveler. I've been here long enough to see things, and let me tell you, the way you handle yourself, the way you carry yourself, that matters." Alicia couldn't help but smile a little, though her thoughts were still heavy. "I'm just trying to get by, Mr. Howard. That's all." He gave her a firm nod. "And that's exactly what you'll keep doing. But don't forget, you're more than what people see on the outside. People like that officer, they judge too quickly. They never know who they're really looking at." Before she could respond, the officer turned back to glance in their direction. His eyes briefly landed on Alicia. He gave a short, dismissive wave, as if to say, "No harm done." But there was something in his expression now. A flicker of doubt, maybe, but also a sort of arrogance. Alicia held his gaze for a moment, then looked away. She didn't want to waste any more time on him. Mr. Howard sighed, watching the officer walk off with his colleagues. "I told you. He'll learn the hard way." Alicia didn't ask any more questions. She knew there was more to Mr. Howard's words than what he was saying. Something bigger was at play here, something she couldn't fully understand just yet. But she had learned to trust people like him, people who saw more than what was on the surface. As she stood there, waiting for her flight, Alicia felt a strange sense of calm. The officer's words didn't hurt as much anymore. Her shoulders relaxed a little. It was as if, in some way, she had already won. She didn't need to fight back. She didn't need to prove anything. But that didn't mean she was done. She had something bigger in mind. Alicia's phone. The airport's atmosphere seemed to shift when Alicia finally made it to her gate. The crowd was still moving around her, but she felt a strange sense of anticipation in the air. It wasn't just the usual pre-flight tension. It felt different, like something was about to happen. She sat down at one of the chairs, glancing around, trying not to let her nerves show. There was something inside her now, a quiet confidence building with each passing minute. The officer's words, the laughter, none of it seemed important anymore. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the text messages. The words she'd seen on her phone, the calm reassurance from the person who was coming for her, were all that mattered. The minutes passed slowly. Alicia stared at the board showing the flight information, but her mind wasn't focused on the details of her journey. It was on something else, something far more significant. Alicia's phone buzzed again. "I'm here. Just walking in now." She looked up, her heart skipping a beat. The flight would be boarding soon, but she knew this wasn't the moment to board yet. This was the moment when things would change. A few moments later, the security doors leading to the waiting area opened, and a tall man in a sharp black suit walked through. He was accompanied by two other men, clearly important, their suits as impeccable as his. They moved with purpose, their presence commanding attention. The group was clearly used to being noticed, and people stepped aside as they passed. But it wasn't the suits that caught Alicia's attention. It was the man's face, the calm confidence, the sharp eyes, and the way he held himself. It was as if he knew the world was watching him and didn't care. He was here for one thing: business. Alicia's phone buzzed again, a new message. "I'm here. Let's do this." A rush of emotion swept over her. The message was simple, but it was clear. The person she had been waiting for was here. And now, the officer who had humiliated her earlier would soon see who she really was. Alicia stood up, her back straight, her eyes focused. She walked with purpose, moving past the crowds. The small bag she had carried so far seemed much lighter now. She wasn't the woman who had been mocked just hours ago. She wasn't just some passenger. As she made her way to the front of the gate, she noticed the officer from earlier. He was still standing there, laughing with another colleague, not a care in the world. His attention was far from her. He was too busy enjoying his moment of power. But Alicia wasn't done. Not by a long shot. She kept walking, her eyes locked on the suited man now standing at the entrance of the gate. His name was Marcus Albright. And he wasn't just anyone. He was the CEO of one of the largest airlines in the world. Alicia had worked with Marcus for years, but not in the way most people would think. She wasn't an employee, and they had never met face to face. She had done things for him, things that people could never imagine. But now, she was about to reveal everything. Alicia reached Marcus, and as she approached, he turned. His sharp eyes softened when he saw her. For a moment, there was a slight flicker of surprise, but it quickly disappeared. He smiled, a knowing smile, and extended his hand. "Alicia," he said, his voice calm and deep, but with a warmth that couldn't be missed. "It's good to see you." She shook his hand, her grip firm but not too tight. There was a history between them, and it was clear that both of them understood what was happening. "You're not here for a flight," Alicia said softly, her voice steady despite the rush of emotions inside her. "You're here for something else." Marcus nodded. "You know why I'm here." Just then, the officer from earlier noticed them. His gaze shifted from the group he was talking to and landed on Alicia, and then on Marcus. His eyes widened slightly. He had seen Marcus before. Of course he had. Marcus Albright was a name that had been in the news for years. His company was huge, and everyone knew him. But what caught the officer off guard was the fact that Marcus was talking to Alicia, someone he had so easily mocked earlier, someone he had assumed didn't belong in this airport, in this world. Marcus saw the officer's confusion and raised an eyebrow. "Is there a problem, officer?" The officer blinked, clearly thrown off. No, sir. No problem at all." Marcus's gaze didn't leave him. "Then maybe you should get back to your job." He turned back to Alicia. "Shall we?" Without waiting for the officer's response, Marcus led Alicia toward the VIP lounge. As they passed the officer, Alicia saw the look on his face, a mix of confusion, embarrassment, and something else. Regret, maybe. He hadn't expected this. The doors to the lounge closed behind them, and Alicia felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She wasn't just some random woman with a worn-out suitcase anymore. She wasn't someone to be mocked. She was someone who had the power to change the game. As the VIP lounge doors closed behind them, the world outside seemed to fade away. Alicia followed Marcus through the sleek, modern space. Everything was pristine, from the polished floors to the carefully arranged seats and tables. The ambience was calming, almost surreal after the chaos of the check-in counter. But Alicia's thoughts weren't on the luxury around her. She felt her heart beating faster as Marcus led her to a private corner. It was time for the confrontation. The moment she'd been waiting for and dreading was here. Marcus turned to face her, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low. Alicia nodded, her breath steady despite the emotions rising within her. I'm fine now. But this wasn't something I wanted to deal with today. I know, Marcus replied, his voice full of empathy. I saw the whole thing from a distance. You didn't deserve that. Alicia took a deep breath, shaking her head. It's not just today, it's every day. It's like they think they can laugh at me because of who I am, or where I come from. Marcus stepped closer, his eyes filled with determination. That's why I'm here. To make sure no one, especially you, ever feels that way again. He paused, letting his words sink in. The weight of the situation wasn't lost on either of them. The injustice Alicia had experienced, countless times before today, had built up into something unshakable. And now, it was Marcus's turn to help her take a stand. Marcus, this isn't just about me. It's about everyone. Every time someone like that officer laughs or judges someone else, it creates a ripple. And those ripples hurt people. Her voice trembled slightly but remained firm. People like me, people like my community, we keep getting pushed down, and they don't even see it. Marcus's face hardened, a spark of resolve flickering in his eyes. That officer, he won't be laughing anymore. I'll make sure of that. But it's bigger than one person. We need to change things from the inside. Alicia turned away for a moment, gazing out of the large windows overlooking the tarmac. The planes outside looked so small, like they could take off at any moment, escape from the tension that was growing in her chest. You know, I thought I could just let it go. Let it slide. But every time something like this happens, I get angrier, and I don't want to just sit back anymore. Marcus put a hand on her shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. And you don't have to. I'm here to make sure your voice gets heard. We can't change things if we don't speak up. Alicia met his gaze, her heart racing as she realized just how much power this moment held. She had always been quiet in the face of such humiliation, but now, with Marcus by her side, it felt like the world was shifting beneath her feet. She wasn't just a bystander in her own life anymore. She was about to take control. As they stood there in the lounge, something inside Alicia clicked. The humiliation from the officer had been the breaking point, the final straw. But now she had an opportunity, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been wronged, dismissed, or made to feel less than they were. This was more than just a confrontation with one man. It was about changing the way the world saw people like her. We'll make sure he never gets to treat anyone that way again, Marcus said, his voice firm, his eyes never leaving hers. And I'll make sure it's done the right way. But we have to act fast. We need to turn this into something bigger. We can't let it slip away. Alicia's heart pounded as she absorbed his words. This was it. This was the moment that would define everything. She had the opportunity to stand tall, to make a statement, to be heard in a way she had never been before. A sharp sound from the door interrupted their conversation. A knock, followed by the door opening slightly. A young assistant stood there, clearly nervous but holding a folder in his hand. Mr. Albright, I'm sorry to interrupt, the assistant said quickly. We've just received word that the officer in question, he's been removed from his post for the day. The higher-ups are taking immediate action. Marcus's eyes narrowed, but his face remained calm. Good, that's just the beginning. Alicia felt a surge of relief mixed with anticipation. It wasn't over yet. This was only the start. But it was a victory, and it felt like the first real one she'd had in a long time. The assistant hesitated, then added, There's also something else. A meeting has been set with the airline's board to discuss future policies on customer treatment. They want to make sure this doesn't happen again. Alicia turned to Marcus, her eyes wide. They're serious about this. Marcus nodded. They'd better be. We're going to make sure that they are. The assistant backed away, leaving the two of them standing in the corner of the lounge, both aware that what had started as a small incident was about to become something much bigger. The officer's laughter, the humiliation, It wasn't just about correcting one mistake. This was about changing the way people like Alicia were treated everywhere. This was the beginning of a much larger movement. Alicia exhaled slowly, her eyes locking with Marcus. "I didn't expect this to happen today, but I'm glad it did." "I'm glad too," Marcus replied, a slight smile forming on his lips. "We'll make sure things change, and it starts with you." The doors to the lounge swung open again, and Alicia turned to see a group of board members entering, ready to discuss the future. This was the beginning of something that would make the world take notice, and Alicia wasn't going to let it slip by unnoticed. Alicia stood at the door of the boardroom, her nerves flickering with each step. The past hour had flown by in a blur of rushed meetings and whispered conversations, but now it was her turn to speak. The air was thick with tension as she and Marcus walked toward the polished, glass doors leading into the room where decisions were made. Decisions that would affect not just her, but countless others who'd been treated unjustly by the airline. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder as they reached the door. His touch was firm, reassuring. "You've got this," he whispered, his voice calm but full of meaning. Alicia nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She had been calm all day, even when everything around her seemed to be spiraling. But now, with so many important people watching her, the weight of it all felt heavier than ever. She wasn't just representing herself anymore. She was speaking for everyone who'd ever felt overlooked or degraded because of their race or background. The door swung open, and the room fell silent. A long, polished conference table stretched out before her. Around it sat several people, all dressed in expensive suits, their eyes trained on her. The room smelled of fresh coffee, polished wood, and anticipation. At the far end of the table, the airline's CEO, a stern man in his 50s with a sharp suit and even sharper eyes, stood. He nodded to Marcus and then turned to Alicia. "Ms. Green," he said in a low voice, "we've been briefed on the incident with the officer. Please, take a seat." Alicia hesitated for a moment, but then walked forward. She could feel the weight of their gaze on her, but she refused to let it break her. She sat down, straightening her back, trying to look confident even as her heart pounded. Marcus sat beside her, his presence like a shield. Together, they made an unspoken promise to stand strong. "I understand that you've requested this meeting to discuss the treatment you received at our airport," the CEO continued, his tone professional but cold. "We take these matters seriously and are committed to ensuring that our employees are held to the highest standards." Alicia opened her mouth, but it was Marcus who spoke first. His voice was steady, but it had a sharp edge. "It's not just about one officer. It's about a larger problem. A pattern of discrimination that goes unnoticed, or worse, is tolerated." Alicia's gaze shifted from the CEO to the rest of the board members. They all looked like they had heard this kind of speech before. Maybe they had. Maybe they'd even promised to do better. But today, it was different. Today, Alicia was here to make sure their promises meant something. "I'm sure you're all aware," Marcus continued, "that incidents like these are far too common. People of color, women, minorities, they are treated as if they don't matter. But they do matter. And if we keep pretending otherwise, we'll never see real change." The CEO shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with Marcus's bluntness. But before he could respond, Alicia stood up. Her voice was calm but firm as she addressed the board. "I've been stopped at security countless times. I've been made to feel small by people who think they have the right to humiliate me because of the way I look. This isn't an isolated incident. It's a daily reality for so many of us," she said, her words echoing in the room. "I don't want apologies. I want change." Her voice broke the silence, but it also brought a quiet authority to the room. The members of the board exchanged glances, as if taken aback by the sincerity and the force of her words. No one had expected this. Alicia wasn't just here to speak up for herself. She was here to make them listen. "We can't keep turning a blind eye," she continued, her eyes now locked on the CEO. "If you really want to change things, it starts with acknowledging that there is a problem. And that problem is the culture of racism, bias, and discrimination that exists in your company. The CEO's face tightened, his lips pressing together in a thin line. "We are not a company that tolerates discrimination," he said stiffly, his eyes narrowing. "We are investigating the officer and have already removed him from his post for the day." This is an isolated case. But Alicia wasn't buying it. She shook her head. "It's not an isolated case. It happens every day, all over the world. How many people have been humiliated, just like me, by your employees or others who think they're above the law?" She paused, her voice growing stronger. "How many people will never speak up because they're afraid of what will happen if they do?" The room fell silent. Even the CEO seemed to take a moment to digest her words. After a long pause, a voice broke through the stillness. It was one of the board members, a woman with dark glasses and a serious expression. "What do you propose we do?" she asked, her tone more curious than defensive. Alicia took a deep breath, ready for this moment. "I want transparency. I want your employees to be held accountable. And I want training for everyone who interacts with customers. But more importantly, I want you to commit to making real changes, policies that go beyond one officer's mistake." She turned to look at Marcus, who gave her a small nod of approval. The CEO sat back in his chair, looking like he was weighing his options. For a long time, the room was still. The tension was palpable as the board members exchanged uncertain glances. Finally, the CEO spoke, his voice low and begrudging. "We'll consider your request, but you must understand that change like this won't happen overnight." Alicia's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't the answer she had hoped for, but it was something. "I don't expect it to happen overnight, but I expect you to take it seriously. I'm not the only one, and you need to start acting like that." The CEO looked at her, his expression unreadable. "We'll be in touch," he said, standing up. "Thank you for your time." Marcus and Alicia stood as well, but before they left the room, Alicia turned back to the CEO. "I'll be waiting." The weeks following the meeting in the boardroom felt like a blur to Alicia. Every day seemed to drag as she waited for any sign of change. She had sent emails, made phone calls, and even followed up with Marcus. But all she received were vague promises. Nothing concrete, nothing that proved the airline was truly serious about reforming their practices. Despite the quiet frustration gnawing at her, she held on to the hope that something was going to shift. She had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to just let this slip away. One rainy afternoon, while Alicia was sitting in her small office at the nonprofit where she worked, she heard a ping from her phone. She picked it up, expecting another generic message. But this one was different. It was from Marcus. The subject line read, "Change is coming." They finally listened. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the message. She had to read it twice before it fully sank in. The email explained that the airline had decided to overhaul its employee training programs, with a special focus on diversity, equality, and customer relations. They were implementing a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination and had already started working with specialists to create new guidelines for how employees would be trained and held accountable. But there was more. Alicia's breath caught as she read on. The airline had also decided to launch a public campaign to address the issues of racism and bias in the travel industry. They were going to work with organizations like hers to make sure real change happened, not just within their own company, but throughout the sector. At the end of the email, Marcus had included a note. "They've even agreed to a public apology for the incident you experienced. And guess who's going to be the one to give it?" Alicia couldn't believe it. This was the moment she'd been waiting for. The moment when all of her work, all the pain and discomfort, had paid off. But even as joy surged within her, a small voice of skepticism lingered. Was it enough? Was this just a tactic to quiet the complaints, or would this really lead to lasting change? The next few days were filled with meetings and preparations. The media team at the airline contacted Alicia, asking her to be part of the official statement. She agreed, but only under the condition that the airline would continue to work closely with organizations focused on equality and social justice. She wasn't going to let them off the hook just because they made a few promises. When the day of the public announcement arrived, Alicia stood in front of a crowd at the airport, her heart pounding in her chest. She was accompanied by Marcus, and together they faced the cameras, ready to speak about the changes that were coming. The CEO was there too. His expression was not as stern as it had been in the boardroom. Today, he looked uncomfortable, but determined. The crowd was buzzing with anticipation. Journalists, employees, and even curious passengers had gathered to witness the event. The CEO stepped forward first. "We stand here today to acknowledge that we, as an airline, have failed to live up to our own standards of respect and equality," he said. His voice was firm, but there was an air of humility about him that hadn't been there before. "We know that our actions in the past have hurt people, and for that, we are truly sorry." He turned toward Alicia, his gaze steady, and continued. "We understand that a simple apology is not enough. Actions must speak louder than words. And so, we are making the commitment to real change." The crowd was silent as the CEO explained the new policies. Alicia stood there, listening intently, not just to the words, but to the way they were being said. This wasn't the same man who had dismissed her in the boardroom. Something had shifted, and Alicia couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope that this wasn't just another empty promise. When the CEO finished, Alicia stepped forward. The cameras focused on her, and the weight of the moment settled over her like a cloak. "I'm standing here today not because of any apology," she began, her voice calm but powerful. "I'm standing here because I believe in the power of change. I believe that when people come together, when they stand up and speak out, we can make the world a better place. It won't be easy. It won't happen overnight. But today, we've taken the first step. And that's something worth fighting for." She looked directly into the cameras, speaking to every person who had ever been dismissed or humiliated for being who they were. "This is for all of us, and I won't stop until the work is done." The room was still for a moment, and then the applause began. It started small, but soon grew into a powerful, resonating cheer. Alicia's heart swelled with pride. But even as the applause echoed in her ears, she knew this was only the beginning. Change was slow, and it was fragile. But it was real. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were finally starting to shift. The camera lights dimmed as the crowd began to disperse. The CEO approached Alicia and Marcus, offering a quiet but sincere handshake. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer now, "for giving us a chance." Alicia nodded. "The real thanks will come when we see the change happen. We'll be watching." The days after the public announcement were filled with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Alicia had done her part, but the real test would be how the airline followed through on their promises. She had already seen too many organizations make public pledges, only to let them fade away when the spotlight dimmed. She couldn't allow herself to believe that this time would be different until she saw a real, lasting change. Despite the uncertainty, there was a palpable sense of energy in the air. Employees from all levels of the airline reached out to her, expressing their gratitude for speaking up. Some even shared their own stories of feeling marginalized or ignored. For the first time, it seemed that the conversations about race, respect, and equality were being taken seriously. Alicia knew it wasn't going to be easy. Systems that had been in place for decades wouldn't change overnight, but the conversations had begun. And that, she realized, was the most important step. A week after the announcement, Alicia received an unexpected phone call. It was from Marcus. "Alicia, I just wanted to thank you again," he said, his voice filled with genuine appreciation. "Your actions have had a ripple effect. People are talking, both inside and outside of the airline. We've already had several meetings with other companies that are interested in following our lead." Alicia couldn't help but smile. "That's good to hear, but it's not enough for just one company to change. The entire industry needs to evolve." "I agree," Marcus replied. "But this is a start. We're committed to making sure the changes stick. We're even working with organizations like yours to continue monitoring our progress, and we're doing everything we can to make sure our employees stay accountable." Alicia felt a sense of relief wash over her. Maybe this time, the promises wouldn't fade. Maybe this time, the ripple effect would spread far and wide. As the days turned into weeks, Alicia watched as the airline began to implement the changes they had promised. New training programs were introduced, policies were rewritten, and most importantly, employees were held accountable for their actions. The airline wasn't perfect, no organization ever was, but they were working tirelessly to improve. And that, for Alicia, was enough. Months later, she was invited to speak at a large industry conference on diversity and inclusion. As she stood before a crowd of hundreds, Alicia reflected on the journey she had been on. She had gone from a woman humiliated at an airport check-in counter to someone who was now standing at the forefront of a movement. Her message had resonated far beyond her own personal experience. It had sparked conversations, changed mindsets, and ignited a fire for action in people across the globe. The room fell silent as Alicia began her speech. We all face moments in life where we're made to feel small. We all have those moments where we're told, either directly or indirectly, that we don't belong. But it's not those moments that define us. It's how we respond to them. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything she had fought for. Change doesn't come from waiting for someone else to act. It comes from standing up, even when you feel like you're standing alone. It comes from speaking the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. And it comes from the belief that no matter how hard the road may seem, we are all capable of making a difference. As she spoke, she noticed the faces in the audience. Some were nodding, others were moved by her words. She had seen this look before, when she had spoken to the media, when she had stood in front of the cameras at the airport. But this time, it felt different. It felt like the beginning of something much bigger. It felt like the start of a movement that could change not just one company, but the entire industry. After her speech, Alicia was approached by several industry leaders, eager to learn more about the steps they could take to make their organizations more inclusive. It was a powerful moment for Alicia, a moment where she realized that her fight for justice had become a catalyst for broader change. As she left the stage, Marcus was waiting for her in the hallway. He smiled at her, his eyes filled with admiration. "You've done it, Alicia," he said quietly. "You've not only changed an airline, you've inspired a whole industry." Alicia smiled back, but her eyes were filled with determination. "This is just the beginning. We have so much more to do." And with that, she walked out of the conference hall, ready to continue the fight. The journey was far from over, but Alicia knew that the work she had started would continue to grow and inspire long after she was gone. Her fight for change had become more than just her own story. It had become a movement that would carry on for generations to come.